We're going back a little bit old school. So when Product Coffee first started, it was really kind of just a big free-for-all roundtable type of a discussion. And we're going back to that a little bit. As we're starting our new series on customer interview styles, we wanted to dig in or on customer interview skills. We wanted to start off with just talking about the different ways you can approach customer interviews, the different styles and types and things that you can think about. Because so often product people get a single approach in their head, and they keep using the same hammer and trying to solve every problem with the same tool over and over again. So we wanted to encourage everybody to step out, expand your view, think about lots of different ways that you can engage your customers. And we're going to be welcoming here in just a moment, we're going to be welcoming Ruth Ye from Sophion, Jackie Flake, Option One Partners, Kate over at NCR, Holly, who's on here at Product Coffee and is a product management executive in fintech and the commerce space, and Tiago Broom, who's a director of product out at ADP. So we want to thank all of these folks. Holly's going to be moderating our panel. I'm going to hand it over to you in just a minute, or our roundtable discussion, excuse me. Now, before we do that, I want to direct you over to a special page. Go to productcoffee.com/notes, and I'd like to ask everybody to do that. If you haven't been here at Product Coffee before, one of the things that we do is we take notes together in a Google Doc. So as you hear something that makes sense, jot it down. Make sure that we capture all the insights together as a team. If you have questions, drop them in there. If you have links or articles that you know of that would contribute to the conversation, drop them in the notes document. Productcoffee.com/notes. Hit the little star on it, save it in your own Google Drive or bookmark it, because you'll be able to come back to this document forever. It will be here as long as Product Coffee is here for you to reference this session and the things that we talked about today. Productcoffee.com/notes. So having said that, I'm going to now hand the mic over to Holly Jewell, who is going to introduce our roundtable and take our discussion forward from here. Thank you, Holly. Thank you, everybody on the roundtable. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. Just to confirm, you guys can hear me okay? Yes?
Yep. You're good.
Awesome. So first, I'll start by introducing one of my newest best friends, Ruth Ye, here from Sophion. I probably just butchered your name. Apologies for that. I work on these things. When you're from Texas, it doesn't matter how long you've known people's names, you mispronounce them. But you are here representing the design side, along with my good friend Kate, that we'll get to in a second. So why don't you go ahead and just give us a little introduction about yourself for those that don't know you as well yet.
Yeah, sure. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Ruth Ye. You got it perfectly right. Yay, like a party. I'm currently head of design at Sophion, and previously I've led design and research teams at tech startups and in banking at Capital One. My background is in research, so today's theme, this whole entire series, is very near and dear to my heart. I literally told Holly, again, my new best friend, that I was like, I have strong opinions, so yes, I would like to join this. So the things on my mind right now, just to go with the theme of folks of what we were talking about in the beginning with the introductions. I'm about 7 weeks into this role, and it had been sitting empty for several months. So I'm standing up a brand new design team and practice, trying to learn all the names, remembering to breathe. You know, it's a lot, but I'm really, really excited to be at the start of this journey. And again, lovely to meet you all, and so excited for the insights today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad you could be here. I'm going to bounce to Jackie next and let Jackie introduce herself here real quickly. Many of us already know Jackie and love her dearly, but for those that perhaps haven't had that pleasure yet.
Thank you, Holly. My name is Jackie Flake, and my last name I like to say is Flake, like snowflake. So not as fun as Ruth's metaphor. But I am a product coach, and I fell into product like many of you. I did not get a degree in product management. So I like to say that I learned product the hard way. I grew up in the Atlanta startup scene. So when it comes to discovery initiatives, had to be very scrappy in the approaches I took to discovery, because I wasn't blessed with full product teams, including a designer and tech lead. So what I'm excited to share with you guys today is kind of what I have learned, what works and what doesn't work.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jackie. And now I will kick it to my good friend, Kate. If you want to introduce yourself, Kate, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, why the wall is strangely green behind you. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah. Great NCR walls. They're beautiful. You know these very well, ma'am. Hey, I'm Kate Womack. I lead UX strategy, which is basically product design here at NCR. I also lead all of our research engagements, particularly in retail and hospitality. So this is a near and dear topic to my heart. I spent a very short amount of time as a product manager and then moved into more of the product design strategy side. And I just want to reiterate what Jackie just said, which I think is really important, is you can do this at any budget. You can do it kamikaze, you can do it very organized, but please, dear God, do it. Because if you don't, you will regret it so much on the back end.
100%. Love it. Anytime. Preach from the soapbox, right? Last, but certainly not least, my emotional support animal, as he introduces himself sometimes. Tiago, would you like to go ahead next?
You just stole my thunder. I was going to say that Mahali is an emotional support animal. But hello, everyone. My name is Tiago Brum. I don't have any jokes to talk about my name. I can just say it is in Brazilian Portuguese. So that's all. That's all I have to share about my name. I'm director of product with ADP. Sometimes I join meetings and I say that my role is to be a professional asker of questions. And I'm really excited with this topic because when we talk about research and when we talk about customer interviews, it's really something very close to what product management is, which is identify the biggest problem worth solving, right? So, and I think that the entire process of finding insights from your customers is really a key to it. So I couldn't agree more with Kate that, like, regardless of how your team is structured, and if you don't have any structure at all and you just want to like dive in, just get it done. Talk to clients, understand how they're feeling, and you definitely won't regret, and it will make your product much better.
Awesome. And thank you for all that. And totally agree, Tiago. And in this case, last and least, I will go ahead and introduce myself for anyone who is lucky enough at this point to not know me. I'm Holly Jewell. I've been doing this a long time. I always joke about the white hair showing. And Tiago, I've got one for your last name. You're always sweeping the product world off their feet. So Tiago Broom. I'm Holly Jewell, and there's all kinds of puns that can be made about the last name Jewell, but not the country singer, because I do not karaoke well, guys. I do karaoke anytime you guys want. Just let me know. I'll show up, but not well. But I have led product teams to build all kinds of amazing things in both the financial space, obviously in payments. You guys heard me riffing about payments earlier, and across commerce and global sales operations tools. So I've had a varied career, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. I have very strong opinions, like my friend Ruth. Anyone who knows me knows that, right? Have opinions will travel has been my personal byline for a long time. It's hard to find something I don't have opinions about, honestly, but I have a lot of them about discovery and customer interviews. I loved everything everyone else on the roundtable said, because the biggest thing is that point, right? Just like Kate said, for the love of God, just do it. It's easy, I think, for product people. And I think I'm going to step back and say, I think it's probably easier now than for many of us who got into product in a more, transitory way, like Jackie was describing, versus coming in now. There is so much more formality. There are degrees in product management. There are other things out there. I think it's easy to feel overwhelmed because of that, because you don't perhaps have an exact prescribed toolkit for some of these things. And so you think, oh God, I'm not going to do it right. But I think what we want to share today and dive into here in a second is that there's not really one right answer. The next thing I want to say, just to kick this off, is you guys, if you're here, you obviously found Product Coffee, so you probably know a little bit about us to know that our whole mission is to dig in and become better product people, no matter what level of career that we're at, whether you're director, a VP, it's just starting out. The goal is to dig in and get better. So as we're having this conversation, the whole point for all of us that are participating here is to share things we've done and what works with that goal in mind, right? Hopefully you'll take away some things from this that you can put into practice that will help you lean in and not just build a better product as a result and have happier customers, but also, take your career, it show that you have these skills and empower you within your organization so that you can continue to have greater impact, which is good for the world, right? It's not just about making our friends more important. It's about if you have more influence in your organization, we know you're going to build even better products. And as someone who uses a lot of products, Jason's very interested because he's always buying new stuff. Anyway, so I want to start with my group here, and I'm going to kick it to Jackie first because I know you have to leave at some point potentially. But in your last series of customer interviews that you conducted, can you tell us a little bit about what you were trying to accomplish and how you approached it?
Yeah. So since I've been coaching for so many years, I'm supporting other product leaders and product teams in their discovery efforts. But for me personally, the most recent discovery initiative I took is with my online training platform that I just launched. And so, it's a way for me to practice my product chops with a personal project that I'm working on. So in those interviews, what I was doing was talking to both potential buyers of my product courses, whether that is the person that's going to take the course as the student or the person that's going to support the budget for those courses, whether they're going to buy a chunk of them for their teams. So I really had to understand, kind of pricing strategy, course content, what works, the ability to be interactive, what's important to people. And so what I like to do is use a technique called Kano analysis. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that one, but really it kind of measures sentiment. Okay, Jason's like, thumbs up. It's a great one. It measures sentiment, measures perceived satisfaction with something. And so really what you're asking questions is you're asking about what you get from it is whether or not someone, the sentiment of how someone feels. So it's very much a qualitative discovery technique. And as we know, you need to have quantitative data and qualitative data in order to get the best insights and make the most informed decisions. But your quantitative data will tell you the what, and the qualitative data will tell you the why. So I can stop there, Hallie. I know others probably have more to contribute, but that's kind of the technique I most recently used that I found success with.
That's perfect. That's exactly what we were going for there. So I'm gonna bounce it to Ruth next. And if you could just kind of talk about the same thing, like in the most recent series of customer interviews, maybe tell us a little bit about, like Jackie did, what you were interviewing and why, but what were you trying to accomplish in that customer interview, and like how did you approach it with that customer? And was it something you thought through? Let me just add this tangent to it, that you thought through specific to that customer, or was it just that you had decided this before the customer was even, it was just customer agnostic?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. My last time I ran an entire design study, I would say we were lucky in that the participant pool was internal. So they were accessible, but there was a very limited amount of them, right? So the topics were very like technicality dense. So a lot of, talking about the cloud and where data moves and all these words that I think may or may not only be used in their circles within that specific company. And so it for me, what worked really well is going in with a plan, right? Like, hey, what is it that the PMs are trying to learn? And like I gather them before and kind of go like, okay, tell me what it is you're trying to learn, and then let's form that script to what you need, right? And the other thing I always try to do is start broad and bring it down. So, tell me about blah, blah, blah. And then I know that we want to hone in on this specific experience, and then we can start digging further into that if they do not give me that information on their own. That said, I really, really loved Kate's term, kamikaze method. I'm going to start using that instead of guerrilla tactics, because in the last couple places I've been at, it's been like startup mode, right? So yeah, it was great. It was amazing having a design team, a research team, a design ops and research ops. I know, I didn't know what I had until I didn't have it. And now it's like, okay, we've got, a very small, maybe 3 to 4 designers, and research is absolutely a combined endeavor with us and the PM. And it's more about, okay, who do we have access to, and what can we, what are we able to get out of their particular experience with our product? So knowing the kind of quantitative data, right, of this is where they stick in the product most of the time, this is where we're seeing the data, let's like target that experience and ask them about that, because they'll have more information to give us about that. The thing I always say is people are terrible, terrible judges of what they're going to do in the future. So if you go in going like, hey, would you buy the subscription service if we had it? You're going to be very upset when I love the support. This feels so good.
We're a very supportive group, Ruth.
I love
We're
that.
always good at that.
In the example I gave you, sorry, I'm going a little bit on tangent, but the example I gave you in our chat about that product, that was like, it would tell you if you ran out of eggs, right? It was like a plastic carton with a sensor or something. And in my head, I was like, what kind of serial killer takes the eggs out of the original carton? Like, tell me who does that and how you did the product study on this. And, understanding that problem, understanding the situation, and reading too much into things can really, and not understanding exactly what that problem or pain point is really going to bite you later down the road, right? So doing this early is really awesome. Oh, someone in the chat does take their eggs out of the carton. I am super impressed by your life. I also think it's one of those like Instagram fridges, with the plastic cartons, and all the lemons are here and limes. It's like color coded. Oh, wow.
I have to jump in here, Ruth, because I'm with you. I actually didn't know about this product till Ruth mentioned it the other day, and that was my first reaction. And I have to say, from my experience with customer interviews, I think it's really easy. I use this term, I think, in product coffee chats a lot about leading the witness, not just because I was obsessed with Perry Mason growing up, but also just it's one of those things I think it's really easy to end up doing when you're a product person, right? You're so excited about your concept or your idea, right? And when you're doing discovery, it's really easy, especially when you get to like the validation stage, right? To really be the way you're presenting it. So I'm sure a product person asked a million people, maybe in a shopping mall, just pulled people over, right? And said, hey, if we could tell you when you were about to run out of eggs or when your eggs were going to go bad before it happened, would you buy this thing? And it was like, yeah, totally. That sounds great. I'd love to know I was about to be out of eggs or my eggs are about to go bad. It's brilliant. Great. Right. But if you started by asking people, are you going to be willing to take your eggs out of the carton when you get home from the store? When you're trying to put all the other stuff away and maybe like jump over cats and deal with children, like, are you going to be willing to take all the eggs out of the carton and put them into another carton? Apparently, it would be limited to, the Sharons and Susans of our chat over here. No, just kidding, guys. But, I think you would have a much different answer, right? So it's an example, I think, of something we really have to be mindful of, regardless of what tactic or style we're using for the customer interview, right? Is to remove the word, I think it's used a lot as bias, but be careful about not leading, right? And making sure you're presenting not just open-ended questions, but questions that get to the right piece here, right? Not just, would you be interested in this concept, but anything that we know that are qualifiers or that are important pieces around what you'd have to be willing to do for this to work. We should be vetting that as well. So, sorry. I'm going to take that same question and I'm going to punt it over to Kate. Kate, why don't you share with us about the last time, you see the smile, you did some customer interviews and how you approached them and what you were trying to solve. And did you just ask people about their eggs, or, how did that go?
Yes, I asked them about their personal serial killer traits because we all have one or two. Actually,
Everyone.
I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of something Ruth said that sparked an idea in me, and then also what you just said, Holly, which is, first off, customer interviews, even the kamikaze style ones, don't happen on accident. There's a lot of thought and effort that goes in beforehand. Especially if you're working with customers, you want to make sure that you've kept that communication line open. You've set them up for success for your interview. You've told them a little bit about what you want to talk about. Don't send them questions ahead of time because then people tend to overthink it. But you need to send them a prompt to say, hey, I want to talk about process X. And also ask, are you the right person to answer questions about process X? Recently, I have a lot of really exuberant, product people who are just dipping their toes into customer research, and they're so excited and they want to interview everyone under the sun that they can get their hands on, and that's great. But then as of yesterday, you end up in a call with a customer who is a big advocate for you, who can't answer any of the questions, and the whole time is apologizing and kind of like, well, I'm not the right fit for this. You kind of should have asked me more. So I think that's really critical. And then I think the second part of that is leading questions. Same thing. All of my amazing product supporters want to get on the call, and the first question they want to ask, because they're so excited, is, how excited does using the new feature make you feel? And you're just sitting there going, I totally get your enthusiasm, 110% understand where you're coming from. But when you've told them they're excited, the human psychology factor is going to respond with, oh, I'm excited about this. And 9 times out of 10, a customer is going to take that prompt that you've given them, right? So a leading question is not just agree with me on this, it's how you phrase the question, right? So a couple quick tricks that I give our new team members when they get started around leading questions is, one, don't mention an interface element. So don't go in and say, hey, how does this button right here make you feel? How does this chat thing that we've added make you feel? You got to start with the general questions, right? Don't rephrase something in your own words unless you're just validating what they've said, right? So you mentioned this picture was helpful to you, and therefore, unless they literally said, yes, this picture is helpful, they may have just mentioned that, like, hey, yeah, I like the picture, which is very different from the picture being helpful, right? Yeah, it's bad.
I'm laughing because that is a great one, right? We've all done it. Your brain just works that way. And we think we're being good, right? We probably had all those English teachers that taught us not to just say the same words over and over and try to find different words for the same things in a sentence. So
yeah. And I go into robot mode a little bit during interviews, and people who know my personality outside of interviews are always like, who the heck has just showed up at this call? So honestly, body language is huge. If I'm sitting there and smiling and nodding when you're giving me the feedback that I want, that can really skew people different ways. Also, not being on camera sometimes means people are disengaged and they're answering emails when they're supposed to be on with you. So it's like little things like that that will actually really skew everything. And I think the biggest thing that I learned early on is, at the beginning of a customer interview, I will tell the participant, hey, I am trained to not give you any nonverbal cues. I'm not trying to be icy or frosty, and it's going to feel a little bit awkward, but this is for the sake and the validity of this research. I have to remove my personality and my personal cues so that I'm not leading the witness. And people really appreciate that, because then A, you're not standing there, all of a sudden your personality's changed and they think you're just disengaged. And B, it can help with your data and your assessment on everything across the board. And finally, it also makes it seem more professional. It makes them, if phrased the right way, it makes them think that you really want their perspective and you're not trying to lead them, and you're trying to really get to the heart of what they want to talk about, not just what you do.
I love that so much. So many points you had there, Kate. I'm going to jump in and just say, agree with the being the robot. And I would say to all of us product people, the relationship you have with your customers and building that rapport, right? We talk about that all the time. And that is so important. And for myself, and I think this is a place where you're talking about like our workshop coming up and like your product trio, for me, a success point here is to bring someone else like a Kate, like a Ruth, like if you have a design team member you can bring that maybe your customer knows but doesn't have that same level of relationship with, right? Or as someone technical or just whatever. Bringing in another person not only lets you one pay attention better if you're me, because squirrel, it's really hard to be in the conversation and taking all the notes from the conversation, which is why you almost never see my notes out there. They're scribbled all over the sticky notes here on the table. But also lets you have that separation, right? So you're not, if you are going to be the person asking the question, I think what Kate just gave us is a pro tip, right? Just say, hey, I'm going to be a different person in this conversation. It's not the usual me that's like the party girl, right? So like, but if you can bring a separate person, and that lets you have both advantages there, being able to be more immersed in the conversation or really actively listening instead of like thinking through the next thing you need to ask. I'm bad about that. I'm thinking through what I'm going to say next. I'm not really listening to you, right? And fun fact, turns out most human beings are. That's how I learned that about myself. Read it in a book, Manesh. I do read sometimes. But the other point there that you brought up around the who, and I want to separate that just because I think the who you interview for something is really, really important. And that's a whole separate conversation, one that's so deep. We're going to talk about that next week, how we make sure we're interviewing the right people about the thing, right? Like, do people eat eggs before we start asking them large questions? If they're Jason and they're vegan, they probably don't. So who cares about his opinions about egg cartons? His stuff comes in like a shaker bottle, whatever. So anyway, with that, Tiago, I'm going to kick it to you for the same question. When you last did customer interviews, no, okay, probably yesterday, how did you approach it and what were you trying to get out of it? And how robotic were you?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I love what Ruth and Kate put out as like the UX research arm of our conversation. And usually whenever there is a validation or some generative research being done, I don't even try to get into these discussions. I tag along with my UX research team and I say, okay, you guys run the show. I'll be here. I'll be your note taker and paying attention to things. But as a product person, what I do on almost daily basis is I have this agreement with my client success team to send my way all the clients that provide a bad NPS score and that have some complaints about the product. So they are my target. And so I talk to a lot of clients constantly because like huge operation, huge client base, you always get something interesting to dig into. Some things that I used to approach the client. So I like to take notes using the Cornell system. So for those of you that don't know the Cornell system, you split your page into three sections. The first one you use on the left-hand side, use the call out. So the topics or the things you want to touch on. Then you have this middle section where you take all the notes and drawings and everything, all the information. And then at the bottom, you do like a summary or takeaways from everything you understood. So that's how I usually organize my poll. Fun fact, in quick digression, we were joking yesterday about, are you a cook or a baker? Right? Because the cook, they get the overall guidelines, but they add their seasonings, they add the twist to the dish, they do things their own way. They kind of play by ear, no pun intended because of my band stuff, but that's another topic. But and the baker on the other side, they need to follow a recipe, a structure, because you need to make sure that the chemical reaction is right. It's like if any of you try to get into baking your own bread at home during the pandemic, you put too much water, it gets really wobbly and almost like unedible. You put less water, like it's good when it gets out of the bread maker, but 1 hour later, like it's as hard as a cinder block. So that's something that you need to follow the recipe very well. So I use these pointers, and the way I approach the clients I talk to is really the first question is, tell me your typical day in the life. Tell me how you get your job done, and let them loose, and they speak their minds about it. And the way I try to validate some of the questions is something that Kate put very well, to not lead the question, is whenever they say something like, let me play this back to you. So I understood this and this. What am I missing? Because I'm always assuming that I didn't get what they said, and then ask them to expand on their comments. So can you expand a little bit more on this part? I don't know if I catch this really well. And when you're practicing this active listening and you're taking notes, you start seeing some patterns, right? Because as you explain, like the things that are really the root of your issue, they start coming up more often. So that's pretty much what I use. And that's really my goal. I want to get to the bottom of the issue. Sometimes the issue they are having is something like, oh, I cannot use this thing. Oh, maybe it's because of a little configuration that you could have done. And because of that, your whole experience is getting like ruined. And one time was really, really funny, because I was interviewing this customer, and they were saying, it takes me so much time to get this done. Like I can't stand with it. I'm like, okay, can you tell me like how long is how much time? Can you give me more specifics? And then they said, I had to stop my work to leave the office, pick up my son at the baseball practice, and then finish the work from home. So that triggered me, especially in the B2B world. Like my motto is, get out of my system as soon as possible. Get your job done, get out. I'm not B2C. I don't want to display ads for you. I don't need any ad revenue. So I just want to like live your life, right? So these are some of the things that I approach. And one more thing, that I've done that in the past, and I don't do this anymore, and I urge you to not do this, is do not ask the question, if you had a magic wand, what would you add to the system? Because this is the recipe for disaster, is something that will put you in the product circle of death, where you ask what the customer wants, they tell what they want, you build what they want, they don't use it. So these are some of the things that I employ with my customers on a almost daily basis.
I love it, Tiago. I want to jump in first. I have to assert, I do love the analogy of the cook and the baker. And the reason I didn't comment right away when I saw that in our Slack here yesterday, be premium, get in the Slack, guys, there's good stuff happening there, is because I was immediately going, Tiago's clearly never seen me cook or bake, because I measure nothing. And nothing is apparently ever the same twice. And God bless me with having boys. So the evidence never makes it out to the world. So whether it was a success or not, as long as it's possibly edible, it's going to get eaten. But there you go. So, but I loved what you were talking about there with regards to, not just how to get right to the problem, right? But also just making sure that's what you're talking about. I think it's, talking about leading the witness, something that I'm also, just passionate about from my time is, are we going after the right thing, right? It's easy we have a thing we've thought of and we want to vet that, like we were talking about, like Ruth, egg carton example, right? But we start, right? Was this conversation just a valid vetting of that concept, or did we start at some point with some good customer discovery, our topic from last month, and in our customer interviews, were we diving into what's the problem that we're trying to solve? Are people not aware that they're running out of eggs, or that their eggs are going to go bad, or whatever the carton does? I'm sorry, I've already forgotten. But are we going after the right problem? And I think you hit right on that too in the magic wand comment, which I absolutely love, Tiago. And I think the whole panel, was nodding along with you, because when you ask that question, not only is it fairy tales and rainbows, and customers don't know what they really want or need in that context, certainly, but also, right, where it's not what is an actual thing that we need to go do something about. You're just saying, hey, what would you do? And they'd be like, oh, it would make the entire app purple and shades of lavender because that's my favorite color. It's true fact. But I did not actually do that in my time. Did I, Kate? I mean, I had smart UX, UI people that said, no, Holly, that's actually not a good design for these applications that NCR wants to sell. but it's you got to go after that right thing and really nail into what are they trying to do. So my next thought is to really we talked a little bit about some different styles kind of on the front edges of this. And I want to ask Kate to really explain when you say kamikaze, which I love so much, but can you also kind of give a broader context to what you mean by that's not actually a suicidal interview, I assume, that you go into.
Yeah.
So why don't you give us a little bit about that? And when you're doing that, the context, and for everyone else here on the roundtable, where I'm going with this is kind of think about are there pros and cons, or what do you think are some of the pros and cons of different types of interviews, in person versus virtual? We've talked around that. We talked about being on camera and stuff like that, right? Make sure people are engaged versus just, answering email. But you talk through some of the different styles and when you're picking which style because of those pros and cons.
Yeah, definitely. And first off, I want to agree with Ruth that purple is very popular this year. I don't know what it is, but the amount of customers who have come to me and been like, a Barney purple, that's what we're going to use. And you talk them down to a lilac or something mildly less offensive. But I digress. So yeah, there's so many types of customer interviews. That's such a big question. And I definitely am going to lean into Ruth to help me to answer that one, because there's so many ways to decide what you're going to do. Let's start with the sort of kamikaze research, right? It's what I typically would call my duct tape research. I have duct tape and a pencil and a pad of paper, and I need to build something for a product. Typically that's when you're operating on a shoestring kind of budget. It's also when you're thrown into a situation sometimes where you're interacting with customers and you didn't have a planned interview, but all of us are really smart people. And in our back pocket, you should always have an interview script or a question you're ready to ask anytime you're going to be around a customer, right? Some of the kamikaze style interviews we'll do are more of like a contextual interview. For one small startup that we were building a product for, I was standing outside of Kroger with a clipboard, like being like, hey, do you mind like telling me about your experience of XYZ? It's uncomfortable, but it's actually in design school. It's one of the first things they make you do is go stand in a parking lot and canvass random strangers to ask them about their opinions. And people have one of two answers. They tell you to expletive off, or they're really interested that somebody cares about their opinion, and all of a sudden you have this really crazy rich data. I would also say that a lot of the time sales type calls can be turned into customer interview calls. That's one of the ways we do some of our kamikaze style research. There's a very thin line there. You have to be very prepared. But a lot of the times, if you sit in a call with a sales team or an account management team where they're talking about like their pain points or the things that they need to work on, or you're getting that information, that's really good secondhand research, basically. And then I would also say that secondhand research is probably part of the kamikaze research that we get, which is I have my professional services team. I've got my account management teams. I've got a funnel where all of those people who are talking to customers, when they hear something, they're bringing it back to me and they're sending me an email to say, hey, this customer said this about this. Luckily, I'm part of a big organization, so I can actually aggregate support tickets. That's where we start talking about the quant versus qual that Jackie was talking about earlier, which is very important. But typically, if you don't have the quantitative data, you can get the qualitative. People really want to talk about themselves and their process. And I think a really good point that was made earlier was around, users don't know what they need. If you ask them questions about what they need, you will end up, we call that the Dante's Inferno proposition, because you end up in the seventh circle of product hell because you've built something based off of your assumptions rather than what your users actually need. I think with all of this, I would say that all of the types of customer research, you should never do it alone. It should always be in a group of two. I don't care if that person is a random intern you grab to do notes. They don't need to know anything about the product. They're not there to talk. They're there to take really copious notes. And I want to go back to something about the note-taking strategies, because I think that's really, really critical, is you want to write literally everything down that came out of their mouth. If you can transcribe it, it doesn't necessarily have to be word for word, but word for word is actually better. Because what happens is when you do a host of customer interviews, you don't know what's important until you start aggregating that data. It's really hard because what happens with our natural internal bias is I'm going to think that I know what the important things were that you said in the interview, because those are the things I think are important, or those are the things we're researching. But typically most of our best breakthroughs comes through when we start aggregating information on sticky notes later, and we realize that they said a bunch of stuff about this one topic that we hadn't even heard of or even considered as the problem. So I would say there are a lot of styles, but those are pretty much rules that apply to them all and can help you out.
I love that, Kate. And I'm just going to throw in there some discussion about this in the chat. Leslie pointed that out too about recording. So, I mean, I would suggest, I know we're talking about different styles, but anytime possible. And I'll just say from my past experience, I totally agree, because for me, I always looked at it as just I wasn't smart enough to know what was going to be important in the beginning until later. But you have a great point around, really, especially if you're able to do it on such a wide scale that you're going to aggregate the data and pump it through some sort of analytics, right? But having that transcription, and we live in a wonderful world, right, where pretty much anything can get, transcribed now. So, I mean, if you're doing it obviously on a Zoom or a Teams or any of those tools, they have some not only easy recording, but possibly, that transcription service. I was famous I'm going to age myself here, in my days out there interviewing my customers, with actually walking in the room with like an old school, like the little bitty mini tapes recorder, and setting that on the table and being like, do you mind if I record this? Which made a lot of them strangely both excited that I care that much about what they had to say, but also possibly uncomfortable. But that's because, 1990s banking. There's that. But yeah, I would definitely say that's a good tactic if you possibly can.
Yeah.
And with that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ruth, jump in.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Kate, double down on everything you said. Absolutely. The best kind of research really is that contextual inquiry, look over your shoulder, like pull you out of the actual environment you're in to talk to you about that. Because again, you're actually doing the thing. We're not talking theoretically about it. You're not trying to rely on your memory to remember what happened 6 months ago, etc. I love that you mentioned that you want to bring in a buddy for the notes. 100 agree with Holly and Kate about taking down word for word what they said. Because, like, as my therapist says, there's what you say, and then there's what somebody perceives it as. And that applies to everything. So, and all this is to say, like, look, we know it's not going to be perfect. I'm a design research by trade, and it's never perfect. Every time I watch my reviews back, I'm like, oh, there we go again, leading the witness, or like smiling when I shouldn't, or whatever. There's always something, but to know, just knowing and being aware of it to improve, right? I have very strong feelings about individual user interviews versus focus groups. Hot take.
Let's dive into that, because those are different styles. Mm-hmm.
Focus groups are such trash, because if this happens sometimes, I'll ask for one person to interview and they'll be like, actually, can I bring Bob? Bob like really knows this stuff. And they bring in, and then one of them talks all the time. The other person says nothing. Or like they're contradicting, like it's just, they're so biased between themselves, and you're dealing with all of that. And now, like, let's say there's like someone's manager. I'm not going to tell you how I really feel about the system. I'm not going to risk my job, right? The other thing in the like do not do category, if you can avoid it, don't do a survey. Please don't do a survey unless it's like, can we talk to you? Like, that's the only survey you should be running, because survey questions to get right is very, very difficult. You must consider all of the possible options, including that they didn't, try your product or try your service. And I have, like, back in college when I was very poor and wanted the 45 cents to fill out surveys for some, user group online.
Totally. We've all done it. It's okay.
Right? Like, I'm filling it out, and as I'm doing it, I'm getting angry, because I'm like, that's a double barrel question. I don't know, are you trying to tell, and then it's like also bias. It's like, do you find this interesting? And I'm like, again, to what Kate said, and doing that on paper and then just taking that number or whatever for face value is going to really skew your results, or you're not going to get the data you think you're getting. Basically, you're going to run with, again, your assumptions rather than the truth. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is you mentioned like in person versus online versus video, no video. Of course, in person, basically each one you lose a fidelity of nonverbal cues. So in person, as much as I like have to deal with my anxiety going into that room because I have to be face to face with the person and talk to them, there's so much nonverbal stuff that you pick up on and you're like, let me dig in a little bit there, right? And there's insights, especially if you're working with a physical product too. I know some places will like send them the thing and whatever, but like you're not going to really see them use it. And then video on virtual, that's, you know, our bread and butter these days. And done well, you can also get a lot of information there, just paying attention to those nonverbals. But yeah, your transcription services are your friend. So thank you, Zoom, for having that. Thank you, Teams, for having that. Like, those are going to help you really suss out, like, okay, this is what they said, and this is matching what this person said, instead of kind of, again, laying your bias, your like investigator bias on it, right? There's a reason when they test drugs, they do a double-blind study. It's because otherwise we'd all be walking around being like, this sugar pill works great. So
Totally agree. Love it. Before we segue that, I'm just gonna tag in. I totally agree, and I know there's some conversation in the chat happening as well, right? It's I use the comment separate the herd, right? But and Kate, you mentioned this as well, and also in the chat. But the manager one is a big one. I get why people want to come in groups, and sometimes I feel like you're not gonna be able to avoid that. It becomes a relationship thing because it's just like we don't want to be alone in the conversation. They don't want to be alone in the conversation, right? So I think on sometimes you have to respect that, but work through, and being in person, recording it, there's a lot of good tips we've talked about already, right? That can help us manage that in a better way. But one rule of thumb I would strongly recommend is that if people are bringing a pack, right, the manager, whoever's that person's supervisor or, you know, decision maker, maybe the ultimate buyer, that person should not be in that conversation, because that will entirely skew what's going to happen, right? Because I'm going to out people from my past. My dear friend Nancy Rios at SunTrust could not be honest if her boss, Kathleen Adugo, the one who's going to write the checks to me at Fiserv, was in the room, because Nancy's going to tell me what they would or wouldn't buy. And Kathy's like, whoa, hold on now. I'm not committing to write checks for that. So, you know, it's you do have to kind of think through those points, right? When you're setting up who can be in the room. So I think that was a really great one to call out, because just that manager, even if it's just one other person, if you have the person you want to get information from and that person's boss, you're not going to get real answers there.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, really quickly, I just put it in the chat, but there is a lot of cultural bias that comes in with a focus group. We all know statistically, and I see it all the time when I run studies, right? Women respond less if there's a really loud man in the room. And nobody's thinking about that. They're just thinking about their normal work dynamics. Minorities will raise their hand less. They will give their opinions less. Introverts will sit there the entire time and not say anything, because they process information differently and they need that silence and they need that beat, versus somebody like me who's a massive extrovert just starts running my mouth immediately. So I really do think, just with like human dynamics and in our world, trying to get really unbiased research. I mean, if you look at the history of research, we pretty much have one cultural perspective for until really the last 20 years. And even then you start looking at the research and who's participating. So I will say something with customer interviews. It is hard to get that wider audience, because you have a very specific type of customer. And depending on your industry, they may look or act a very specific way. But overall, please try to round out your customer pool, because we all have very unique perspectives on life based off of where we're coming from. And if you only get one perspective, you're building a product that suits one demographic. And unless that's what you want to do, you want to naturally limit your product up front, really try to kind of find those unheard voices.
Yeah,
I
it's
love that. Kate, sorry,
it,
Tiago. I was just going to say that I think that can be hard. And I would just put out there for those of us that are nodding along thinking, oh God, that's happened to me so much. It can be hard in certain industries. You know, I mentioned that example, you know, of specific name dropping earlier, because there's certain industries that become right, wrong, and different. Who knows how it happened, right, or why, but almost dominated by a certain group or industry or gender, right? We used to joke in banking that, you know, all the leadership, CX levels of financial institutions are a certain group, middle-aged white men, and all the people actually doing the work to actually know how payments work and all that stuff is another group, middle-aged white women. So it's, you know, that's kind of what seemed to happen. Really, it's not even white, it's just middle-aged women for some reason, right? But so that's who you're going to end up interviewing. But to your point, like wherever possible, try to bring in that diversity. Sorry, Tiago.
no, and I agree with that. And another thing is, I think it all goes back to like trying to avoid situations where you have the alpha dog, right? So I don't know if you guys read that book, Sapiens by Yuval Harari, and he talks about like our tendency to belong to a group. So the groups that are like less than 50 individuals, it just takes like one or two alpha characters to lead the herd, right? So that's some of the things that I'm a little cautious with these focus groups, is because you can always have that type of character that will interject, that will power play, right? And also for the one-on-one interviews, my personal and in my experience, right? I do a lot of interviews on Zoom, and I open my camera and I try to get the visual, the nonverbal cues that Ruth and Kate talked about all the time. For us to really go face to face with a client is a huge investment, and then like it's something that really requires you to be there, right? But yeah, like I think when it comes to the best form, it really depends. But one thing you definitely need to avoid is to have those characters that will jump in and they would just steal the entire conversation, because they can skew all the results, and it doesn't
Right.
matter like how much good data you had before that person started interjecting. After that, you'll see that if everything else will go downhill. So
Totally agree. I think that's a great closer. Jackie, I want to give you an opportunity just to say any last pointers you have for us before we hand this back to Jason to close out our show.
Sure. So I come from the perspective of the scrappy discovery techniques. And so I'll just say that in launching my product courses, I just have one other person working on this with me. So with the best practice of having two people together, at least two in a room to interview, I don't have that luxury. So what we've been able to do is interviewing people who've taken our courses over a Zoom. So the instructor who does the course does not do the interview. It's my other partner. And then she'll record it and I'll watch it later so that I can at least have another perspective.
I like that.
Yeah. And then I will just say the last thing is when you're doing customer interviews, it's not A/B testing. So you don't have, and I don't know if Kate and Ruth would agree, but you don't have to keep your questions the same every time, because you're going to iterate and improve and use those feedback loops and your learnings with each interview that you make. So it is okay to change up the questions as you learn and go along.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jackie. I want to thank everybody who was on the roundtable today, whether I pinged you privately and begged you to join me. I think that's true for everyone here, actually, or, you know, however we came to this. But it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot doing it. I need to go try and put some of my brain dump into the notes documents. I encourage all of you to do that as well, because I know every single one of you on the roundtable has more to share. And please put it in our notes document. And with that, Jason, I'll hand it back to you. Thanks for letting us do this.
Thank you so much, Holly, and once again, I want to thank Kate, Tiago, Jackie, and Ruth, as well as Holly for moderating this. This has been a great discussion. I just dropped a link in the chat. If everyone would please click that link, that takes you to the survey for today's session. We'd really love your feedback. Want to hear what you want to hear more about. What other questions do you want us to answer over the course of this month? We're going to do an Ask Me Anything at the end of the month. We want to make sure that we've covered off on everything that you want to hear. And but this has been an absolutely fantastic session. Thank you to everyone. Also want to once again welcome Andy and Tanya and Brian who joined us for the first time here today. If I missed anybody, I'm sorry I missed you. We will certainly look forward to seeing you here again. Don't forget, head over to productcoffee.com/events and sign up for our workshop this Friday on discovery frameworks. And we've also got our new book club starting up next week. Head to productcoffee.com/book club to find out about that one. We are going to be digging in and reading and discussing Product Roadmaps Relaunched by C. Todd Lombardo and Bruce McCarthy. Bruce has been a friend of Product Coffee and has been on here a couple of times to talk to us. And we're gonna go back and read that book and do some discussion around that. That's it for this week. It's been a great Product Coffee. We'll see you back here next week at 7:30 a.m. Eastern for our panel on selecting the right customers to interview and getting them engaged in your interviews. So thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next time.